The rain started as a soft drizzle, pattering against the windshield like gentle fingers, and thickened into a cold, steady downpour by the time Alex Rivera turned off Highway 101. The wipers danced rhythmically, counting down to their annual ritual. 3 days. That was the rule they had kept for 14 years. 3 days every autumn to remember there was still air in their lungs, sky above their heads, and a world beyond bill payments and screens. It was their reset button, a pilgrimage into the Olympic Peninsula's wild heart, where stress and problems died along with their cell signals. Jordan groaned as he unfolded himself from the back seat of the Subaru. His lanky frame suffered during the 4-hour drive from Seattle. He stretched, joints popping in the quiet parking lot. Next year, Hawaii. Beaches, Mai Tais, zero chance of getting hypothermia. I'm serious this time. His breath fogged in the chill air, and he rubbed his hands together, already regretting not packing thicker gloves. Alex killed the engine with a twist of the key, the sudden silence amplifying the rain's drum on the roof. You say that every year. Then you're the one texting us in July asking if the permits dropped. Admit it. You love the suffering as much as we do. Alex grinned, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, but there was a weariness in his eyes. At 35, the hikes were starting to remind him of his age, the way his knees creaked on descents. Mia was already wrestling her pack from the trunk, hood up against the deluge, her ponytail flopping like a wet flag. She was the organizer, the one who mapped routes and packed extra protein bars. Come on, you two, we're burning daylight. Her voice was brisk, but there was excitement in it, a spark that had dimmed in her day job as a graphic designer, but reignited out here. They signed the register at the Elwha Ranger Station, scribbling their names and itinerary in the soggy logbook. The ranger on duty, an older woman with a ponytail streaked gray, glanced up from her coffee. Weather's turning. Watch for washouts on the upper trails. They nodded, thanked her, and slipped into the trees, the forest swallowing them whole. The first day was routine, a familiar rhythm that eased the knots in their shoulders. 6 miles of boardwalk and salmon streams, the Elwha River roaring on their left was their constant companion. The easy, overlapping talk of people who had survived one another since college filled the air. They laughed about the time Jordan tried to filter boxed wine through a Sawyer squeeze, ending up with a purple mess that stained their gear for weeks. About the time Mia's ex, the one with the superiority complex and a penchant for quoting Nietzsche at campfires, tagged along and complained about everything from bugs to the lack of Wi-Fi. About sophomore year, when Alex and Mia dated for 6 disastrous weeks, a whirlwind of awkward kisses and arguments that somehow strengthened their friendship rather than breaking it. As they hiked, the conversation drifted to life updates. Jordan, the perpetual freelancer, told them of his latest gig writing ad copy for a startup that sold eco-friendly toothbrushes. They want me to make brushing sound like a revolution. Fight plaque, save the planet. He mimed a dramatic pose, nearly tripping over a root. Mia shared about her recent promotion, how the corporate ladder felt more like a treadmill. Alex, the quiet engineer among them, mentioned his latest project, designing bridges that could withstand earthquakes, but his mind was elsewhere, lost in the green cathedral of ferns and firs. By late afternoon, they left the maintained trail and climbed into country that was still wild, raw, untouched by the National Park Service's grooming. The path narrowed to a faint game trail, marked only by occasional blazes on trees. Alex navigated by memory and red lines drawn on laminated maps, his compass a trusted relic from another life. Mia's GPS watch beeped every mile, a digital heartbeat confirming their progress. Jordan rationed Sour Patch Kids from a Ziploc bag, popping them like pills, and complained just loudly enough to remind them he hadn't fallen behind. My feet are killing me. If I lose a toe to frostbite, I'm suing both of you. At 4,200 feet, the ridge opened like a curtain parting on a stage, and the world fell away. The Bailey Range floated above them, white and abominable under a blanket of fresh snow, peaks jagged as shark teeth against the bruised sky. The Elwha glinted 2,000 feet below, a silver thread weaving through the valley. They stood shoulder to shoulder without speaking, breaths sinking in the thin air. This was why they came back. Moments like this, where the vastness stripped away the petty concerns of daily life and left only awe. Then down again, into the unnamed drainage, a steep descent that tested their quads and resolve. The rain had turned the soil to mud, and they slid more than walked, grabbing at salal bushes for balance. The light was bleeding out, the forest dimming to shades of gray and green, when Mia stopped abruptly. She pointed to a faint scar in the underbrush. "Old spur here," she said, wiping rain from her face. "Drops hard, then flats above the creek. Saves us a mile tomorrow, easy." They descended sideways through Devil's Club and Slide Alder, packs snagging on thorns that drew pinpricks of blood, boots sliding on wet leaves that hid slick rocks. The temperature dropped with every 100 feet, the air growing heavier, laden with the scent of decay and damp earth. Then the smell hit them, sharp, metallic, wrong, like rust and ozone mixed with something organic and foul. Jordan saw it first, freezing mid-step. "Plane!" The Cessna Caravan lay on its side, half swallowed by moss and ferns, as if the forest had claimed it as its own. One wing stood upright 20 yards away, wrapped by a nurse log like a twisted embrace. Vines, thick as wrists, had threaded through the shattered windows and out again, binding the wreckage in a green web. The registration numbers were faded to ghosts, eroded by years of weather. The fuselage was crumpled, paint peeled away to reveal aluminum scarred by impact. They circled in silence, hearts pounding. No bones scattered about, no obvious signs of death, just a small purple backpack, one strap missing, caught in the undergrowth. A plastic tiara hung from the yoke inside the cockpit, its pink stones long gone, dulled by exposure. Alex felt the hairs rise on his neck, a primal warning. We shouldn't camp here. Feels off. Mia was already moving downslope, her practical nature kicking in. 50 yards. Creek will cover any noise, and we need water anyway. They pitched tents in the last gray light, the rain easing to a mist. Jordan built a small fire with damp wood, coaxing flames from kindling with frustrated patience. The wreck stayed visible upslope, pale against the darkening trees, watching. They were eating their rehydrated meals when they first heard the sounds, faint thumps emanating from somewhere beyond the trees, footsteps, deliberate and unhurried. Alex's spoon paused mid-air. Mia's hand went to her multi-tool. Jordan whispered, "Bear?" 6 figures stepped into the firelight as though cast out by the forest itself. The man in front was tall, but long hunger had carved him down to something sharp and antler-like, his frame all angles and sinew. His beard was iron gray, braided with what might have been fishing line or dried sinew. He wore the remnants of a pilot's jacket, leather cracked and re-sewn with crude stitches. The woman beside him was smaller, eyes bright in a sunburned face etched with lines from squinting at horizons. Behind them stood 4 teenagers, 2 boys, 2 girls, barefoot on the cold ground, lean and scarred and utterly still, like statues come to life. The man spoke first, voice low, almost gentle, carrying the cadence of someone unused to conversation. "You found our home." Alex stood slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. "We didn't mean to trespass. We'll be gone at dawn, just passing through." The woman tilted her head, a bird-like motion. "I'm Sarah. This is Tom." our children, Eli, Lila, Thorn, and Sage. Come share our fire. The night is cold, and we don't often have company." Her smile was welcoming, but her eyes held a depth that unnerved, like staring into a well. Reluctantly, they followed, packs left behind, but senses on high alert. Their camp lay a quarter-mile deeper, in a bowl gouged out by ancient glaciers, hidden from casual eyes. There were several shelters ringing a central fire, lean-tos roofed with salvaged aluminum, from the plane perhaps, walls of woven cedar bark and parachute cord. A smokehouse stood to one side, racks of silver fish drying over smoldering embers, the air thick with the scent of alder smoke. Garden terraces climbed the slope, wild potatoes dug from the earth, nettles for tea and fiber, pale fibrous roots that looked like mutated carrots. Above the largest shelter rose a tripod of antennas, wires trailing into the dirt like dead nerves, perhaps remnants of the plane's radio, jury-rigged but long silent. They sat on logs worn smooth by years of use, the wood polished by countless sittings. The family moved with a quiet efficiency, a choreography born of necessity. Eli, the eldest at 20, fed the fire without being asked, his movements precise, adding branches that crackled and popped. Lila filled tin cups from a pot that smelled of roots and wood smoke, her long fingers steady. Thorn and Sage watched the newcomers with identical riverstone eyes, unblinking and assessing. Tom told the story the way you feed a fire, slowly, carefully, never too much at once, letting the flames build. He spoke of the flight, a Christmas gift from affluent relatives, a chartered Cessna bound for a family gathering in Victoria. The storm came fast out of the north, icing the wings in minutes, turning the plane into a leaden bird. The pilot fought it for 20 agonizing minutes, radio crackling with maydays that went unanswered in the interference. Then the mountain rose up, unforgiving. Tom woke upside down, gasoline stinging his nose, Sarah screaming from the back. The children were alive, cut, burned, crying in terror. The pilot and co-pilot hadn't been so lucky, bodies mangled in the cockpit. A family friend, tagging along for the holiday, lay still in the aisle. They waited for rescue, huddled in the wreckage, built signal fires that the relentless snow buried overnight, flashed the landing light until the battery died, a futile beacon in the whiteout, dragged orange seat cushions into the shape of the word help, only for the storm to cover it like a shroud. Weeks passed, turning to months. Snow came early that year and stayed late, a frozen prison. The emergency rations lasted only 10 days. Energy bars, nuts, a few MREs that tasted like cardboard. Hunger set in, gnawing and relentless. Then spring came, thawing the trails, and with it the chance of walking out. Tom paused here, staring into the flames. "We could have left," he said, voice steady. Trails were clear by May, but we looked at what waited out there. Bills piling up, school systems that brainwash children into conformity, jobs that grind souls to powder, screens that steal your thoughts. We looked at what we had built here, a life unfiltered, raw and real, and we chose to stay. Sarah's smile was soft, almost tender, as she added, "Here we are honest. Here we are free. No illusions, no pretenses. The forest teaches you truth." Jordan tried a joke to cut the tension, his usual defense. "So, extreme off-grid parenting? Like, Bear Grylls meets the Swiss Family Robinson? Tom's laugh was warm, echoing in the bowl, but it didn't reach his eyes. Something like that. We've learned to thrive where others would perish. The kids were strange in ways that were hard to pin down, subtle dissonances that built unease. Eli had the body of a distance runner, lean muscle honed by the wild, but his eyes never quite met yours, darting away like startled deer. Lila's hair hung to her waist, braided with hawk feathers and small polished beads that caught the firelight oddly, refracting it into prisms. Thorn and Sage moved like twins, though they looked nothing alike. Thorn fair and wiry, Sage dark-haired and slight, always within arm's reach, breathing in unison, as if sharing a single thought. When Mia offered chocolate from her stash, Sage took it with both hands, smelled it deeply, bit off half with a snap, and passed the rest to Thorn without a word. Their teeth were very white, almost luminous in the fire glow, and Alex couldn't shake the feeling they were too perfect, too sharp at the edges. Night deepened, the stars hidden by clouds, the fire burning low and hot. Somewhere high above, something heavy moved through the canopy, branches creaking under weight. The family didn't flinch, as if it were commonplace. Tom stood abruptly. You'll sleep by the creek. Ground is softer there, and the water sings you to rest. They retreated to their tents, hearts hammering against ribs. Inside the nylon walls, they whispered urgently, voices muffled by the rain's return. They could have walked out any time after the first winter. They chose this? Mia asked in disbelief, her flashlight casting shadows that danced like specters. Jordan scoffed, though his voice trembled. Rich people LARPing as mountain men, nothing more. Probably had a trust fund waiting, but wanted to play caveman instead. Alex listened to the night, the creek's murmur a constant undercurrent. Something's wrong with the way they move, like they've forgotten how to be around other people, or never learned properly. And those kids? They're too quiet, too in sync. None of them slept well, tossing in sleeping bags that felt like straitjackets, ears straining for footsteps in the dark. Morning arrived wrapped in fog so thick the tents vanished 10 feet away, turning the world into a ghostly haze. They packed fast, stuffing gear with numb fingers, eager to leave. Tom was waiting at the edge of their sight, materializing from the mist like a wraith. Slide took out the trail above the creek, he said matter-of-factly. Big one last night, boulders the size of cars. Stay today. We'll guide you the safe way tomorrow. No sense risking it. Reluctance warred with caution. They agreed, but tension coiled tighter. They spent the day being shown the country, a guided tour that felt both hospitable and confining. Eli led them up a game trail no wider than a boot print, pointing out elk signs still steaming in the damp air, morels big as fists pushing through the duff, a spring that tasted of iron and snowmelt, pure and biting. When Alex asked why they never left, Eli smiled faintly and said, "Leave for what? Here the trees know our names. The wind tells our stories. Out there, it's all noise and forgetting." Sarah walked with Mia, showing her how to twist nettle stems into cordage, strong as rope, how to read moss on trees for north, thicker on the shaded side. She spoke softly of childbirth without doctors, of sage born during a January thaw under a sky cracked with stars, placenta buried beneath a cedar that now bore fruit for them, a cycle of life and renewal. Lila stayed close to Jordan, asking questions in a voice barely above the creek's babble. What did cities smell like now? Exhaust and coffee, or something new? Did people still cry at movies, letting tears fall freely? Her fingers never stopped moving, testing the edge of his knife with a thumb, tracing the teeth of his jacket zipper, touching the pulse in his wrist, counting the beats as if memorizing a rhythm. Jordan laughed it off at first, but her intensity unnerved him, like being studied by a predator. They swam at noon in a pool where the creek plunged into black water, deep and frigid from mountain runoff. Thorn and Sage dove from the highest rock without hesitation, slicing the surface with barely a ripple. Jordan followed, yelling when he surfaced from the shock of the cold, his skin prickling with gooseflesh. Alex watched from the bank and saw the way the younger kids moved, too fluid, too quiet on re-entry, emerging without gasping, as if the water were their element. Back at camp, the friends tried again to leave, packs shouldered. Tom shook his head, pointing to gathering clouds. One more night. Storm coming. High winds, lightning. You'd be fools to go. The stew that night was thick, dark, rich with flavors that defied the wilderness. Hints of wild onion, garlic mustard, and something deeper, gamey. Jordan ate 3 bowls, slurping noisily, declaring it the best thing he'd ever tasted, better than any Seattle bistro. Mia pushed hers away untouched, claiming a sour stomach. Alex tasted rosemary and iron, and something that made his stomach turn over slowly, a metallic tang that lingered on his tongue. They retreated early, feigning exhaustion. Inside Alex's tent, they made the plan. 2 a.m., no headlamps to give them away. Follow the creek downstream to the Elwha, 8 miles to the road and safety. At 1:17 a.m., Alex woke to the soft rasp of a zipper. Jordan's tent, unmistakable. Jordan's sleeping bag was empty, his boots gone. Alex shook Mia awake, panic rising. They pulled on boots in the dark, grabbed packs and camp axes for defense. Outside, the family's fire painted everything blood orange, embers glowing like eyes. Jordan sat on a log between Tom and Sarah, shoulders slumped, eyes wide and fixed on the flames, unblinking. Thorn stood behind him, one hand resting lightly on the back of his neck, fingers splayed like claws. Sage was braiding thin white cords into Jordan's hair, cords that gleamed wetly, slick with something viscous. Mia made a small, broken squealing sound, hand over mouth. Alex grabbed her sleeve and pulled her into the trees, away from the light. They ran blindly, the forest absolute black, no moon to guide. Branches whipped their faces, drawing blood in hot lines. Devil's Club tore skin in burning scratches, thorns embedding like barbs. They stuck to the creek bed, leaping rock to rock, water numbing their legs to stumps. Behind them, the camp came alive, not with shouts or alarms, but with quiet purpose. Bare feet padding on stone, breath steady and close. Hunters on the prowl. They ran until the creek narrowed and cliffs rose sheer on both sides, funneling them like a trap, until Mia slipped on moss-slick granite and went under the icy flow, coming up silent, eyes huge with terror, sputtering water, until the sounds of pursuit finally faded into the night, swallowed by distance. Dawn found them on the main trail, clothes shredded to rags, faces crusted with blood and tears, bodies trembling from exhaustion and cold. They were only a few hours from civilization, staggering like survivors of a war. Not long after finding a gravel road, they flagged down a 4x4 driven by loggers, who stared at their disheveled state before bundling them into the cab. Alex's voice shredded from telling the story before he believed it himself. repeating it to the rangers, the police, anyone who would listen. The search lasted for 3 days, helicopters overhead, teams combing the drainage with dogs and thermal imagers. Authorities found the wreck, vines and all, confirming the long-lost Cessna from a decade-old missing persons report. They found the camp, shelters intact, gardens overgrown but tended. They located Jordan's body first, hung upside down in the smokehouse, throat opened with a single precise cut, already half butchered, meat stripped in neat fillets, salted and smoking. Then they found the pit, hidden under a floor of woven branches, dozens of skeletons jumbled in a macabre heap, some very small, child-sized, fragile as bird bones. The longer bones had been split lengthwise, marrow scraped clean, skulls missing lower jaws, teeth extracted, perhaps for tools or trophies. The family had survived the first winter on the pilot, the co-pilot, and the family friend who had come along for the ride. Desperate acts born of starvation, or so the story went. But they didn't want to leave. The choice to stay was deliberate, a descent into something darker. Everything after that first winter had simply been additional protein. Hikers gone missing over the years, attributed to accidents or exposure. The stew's richness that Jordan couldn't stop praising. The way the children's teeth caught the firelight, polished by gnawing on bones. Rangers closed the drainage, posting signs warning of unstable terrain and hazards. But they were taken down a few weeks later, vanished without trace. No one's certain who removed them. Poachers, perhaps? Or something else. Deep in the Olympics, when the wind moves down certain canyons just right, carrying whispers of pine and decay, campers still see a thin column of smoke rising from places that aren't on any map. If curiosity gets the better of them, they find a fire already laid, trout roasting on spits, aromatic and inviting, and 6 people waiting with the calm hospitality of those who learned long ago that the forest always provides, and winter always comes, and the children must eat. The sky had been brooding all day, heavy clouds swirling over the treetops of Blackwood National Forest like a shroud, casting an eerie pall over the landscape that made the vibrant greens of the pines seem muted and threatening. It was supposed to be a perfect weekend getaway for the 5 friends from Portland, a chance to escape the relentless rain of the city and reconnect amid the raw beauty of nature. Jake, the burly 32-year-old construction worker with a scruffy beard and a knack for bad puns, had organized it all, his enthusiasm infectious as he mapped out the route on his battered phone app weeks in advance. No phones, no drama, just us and nature, he'd said with a grin, clapping Tom on the back hard enough to make the slimmer man wince. Tom, 30, was the quiet IT specialist, his glasses perpetually fogged from the humidity that clung to the air like a second skin, always more comfortable debugging code than navigating social dynamics. Denise, Jake's girlfriend of 3 years, 29 and ever the planner, had packed every tool from water tablets to bear spray, her backpack bulging with first aid kits, energy bars, and even a portable water filter just in case. Lena, 28, Denise's best friend since college, was the free spirit with tattoos snaking up her arms in intricate patterns of vines and birds, always ready for an adventure and quick to laugh off any mishaps. And then there was Sarah, 27, the newest addition to the group. an artist who had just moved to town from Twin Falls and was eager to prove her outdoorsy skills, her sketchbook tucked away in her pack for capturing the forest's moods. They'd hiked in about 10 miles from the trailhead, the path winding through dense pines and oaks, their branches interlocking overhead like a skeletal ceiling that filtered the dim light into garbled patterns on the forest floor. The air was thick with the scent of pine resin and damp earth, a rich, loamy aroma that invigorated their steps at first. Birds chirping occasionally as the group discussed work stresses, failed relationships, and the latest true crime podcast Lena was obsessed with, her voice animated as she recounted grisly details. "Did you hear about that National Forest serial killer?" Lena said, her eyes wide with a mix of fascination and unease. "Gary Hilton, the guy who preyed on hikers in places like this. Remote trails, no witnesses. Killed at least 4, buried them in shallow graves right off the paths. He'd lure them with friendliness, then, well, you know." She shivered dramatically, but there was a genuine edge to her tone. Jake laughed it off, his deep chuckle echoing slightly off the trees. "Come on, Lena. That's old news from like 2008. He's been locked up for years, rotting in some Georgia prison. We're fine out here. No boogeymen in Blackwood." But Sarah felt a chill despite the warmth of the afternoon sun breaking through sporadically, her skin prickling as if unseen eyes were upon them. The forest felt alive, watching them calmly, the rustle of leaves sounding almost like whispers in the underbrush. As the sun cast long shadows that stretched like hands across the trail, the sky darkened abruptly, the clouds thickening into a threatening mass. Thunder rumbled low and ominous, vibrating through the ground, and then the downpour hit. Like a bucket overturned from the heavens, unleashing a torrent that drenched them instantly. Cold rain lashed down in sheets, stinging their faces and turning the trail into a slippery river of mud that began gripping their boots. "Stay together," Jake yelled, his voice straining over the roar of the wind and water. But the gale swallowed his words, whipping branches into a frenzy. Panic erupted as the group scattered frantically, seeking cover amid the chaos, their laughter from earlier dissolving into shouts of alarm. Denise slipped on a wet root, her ankle twisting painfully as her hand tore from Jake's grip, sending her crashing sideways into the underbrush, thorns scraping her arms as she rolled to a stop in a puddle. Lena ran to the right, toward what she thought was a rocky overhang, her feet sliding in the muck, heart racing as lightning cracked overhead. Tom bolted straight ahead, his backpack bouncing wildly against his back, glasses smeared with rain, blinding him further as he crashed through low-hanging branches. Sarah, heart pounding in her chest like a trapped animal, veered left, branches whipping her face with sharp stings, drawing thin lines of blood as she ran blindly through the veil of water, her breaths coming in gasps. The storm raged for what felt like an eternity, rain pounding relentlessly on the canopy above. Lightning revealed the woods in stark, blinding flashes that displayed twisted trunks and shadowy voids. Denise found herself alone, crouched under a fallen log that offered meager shelter, her clothes plastered to her skin like a cold second layer, shivering violently as the chill seeped into her bones. She called out for the others, her voice hoarse and desperate, but it was lost in the roar of the tempest, drowned by the ceaseless drum of rain. When the downpour finally eased to a persistent drizzle, she emerged slowly, mud-caked and disoriented, her ankle throbbing with each tentative step, a deep gash across her palm from grasping a thorny vine, pulsing with fresh blood that mixed with rainwater, dripping steadily onto the saturated ground. Jake was the first to find her, stumbling out of the mist like from seemingly nowhere, a long scratch across his cheek oozing blood. his jacket torn at the sleeve from snagging on branches. "Denise! Thank God!" he gasped, pulling her into a tight hug that squeezed the air from her lungs. His breath came in heaves, eyes wild with a fear he tried to mask. "I saw something. Someone. In the trees during the storm. Following me. Swore it was just a shadow, but it was haunting. Like it was stalking my every step." "Don't scare me like that," Denise replied, but her voice trembled, a quiver that revealed her own unease. They set up a makeshift camp in a small clearing nearby, using a tarp from Denise's pack to shelter from the lingering drizzle, the fabric snapping in the wind as they strung it between trees. Jake built a fire with wet wood he scavenged, the flames sputtering at first before catching, smoke spiraling upward in acrid coils that stung their eyes as they waited nervously for the others, the crackle of the fire the only sound in the heavy silence. Lena was next to arrive, staggering into the camp with a thick branch clutched like a makeshift weapon, her face pale and streaked with mud. Her arm was bandaged crudely with a strip torn from her shirt, blood seeping through the fabric in dark patches. "I fell into a ditch full of sharp rocks," she muttered, sinking down by the fire with a wince, the warmth doing little to chase away her shivers. But that's not the worst. Someone was there in the rain, chasing me. I heard footsteps, heavy ones splashing through puddles, getting closer. I hid behind a boulder, and they passed, but I swear they were human, not some animal. The footsteps were unmistakable. Tom arrived shortly after, his glasses cracked in one lens, a knot swelling on his forehead. "Tripped over a root hidden in the mud," he said quietly, his voice steady, but his eyes darting nervously to the encroaching shadows. "Felt like eyes on me the whole time, always at my back, like something, or someone, was hurting me here." Sarah was the last to stumble in, emerging from the tree line with tear-streaked cheeks and a deep cut above her eye, blood matting her hair into sticky clumps. "I ran straight into a cluster of low branches," she sobbed, collapsing into the group hug they offered, her body trembling uncontrollably. But there was a man out there, tall, hooded figure in the storm. He saw me through the rain, started coming closer. I threw rocks to distract him and ran faster than I've ever run in my life. As the group reunited around the fire, their initial excitement at finding each other turned to a creeping terror that settled like fog in the clearing. They compared stories in hushed tones, each recounting the sense of being pursued, guided back to this spot by someone unseen. Fresh wounds marked them all, scratches from branches, gashes from falls, bruises blooming on skin from the chaotic escape through the storm. But it was Lena who noticed the symbols first, her curiosity overcoming her fear. As she gathered more wood for the fire to keep the flames high, her flashlight beam swept across a nearby oak, revealing something unnatural. The bark was carved deeply, a rough symbol etched into the trunk, a swirling pattern with crossed lines, like a stylized map or an ancient ritual mark, the cuts fresh and sap still flowing. "Guys, look at this," she whispered, her voice barely loud enough to hear over the crackling fire and the distant drip of water from leaves. The group gathered close, flashlights converging on the carving. It was undeniably fresh. Bark chips still littered the base like confetti. "There's more," Tom said, his voice tight as he pointed to adjacent trees. Similar symbols adorned them, encircling the clearing, an ominous boundary. Denise's face paled under the mud streaks as she pulled out her trail map from her pack, though it was soaked from the rain and curling at the edges. "This looks exactly like the marks of the forest phantom. You know, that serial killer from years ago? Gary Hilton, the National Forest serial killer." He operated in remote places like this, left carvings on trees near the camps of his victims as some kind of signature, symbols to mark his territory before he tortured them. Jake scoffed at first, trying to maintain his role as the group's tough guy. That's just urban legend. Hilton didn't carve symbols. That was Hollywood embellishment. But Lena shook her head firmly, recalling the podcast episode she'd binged on. No, there were real reports in the case files, unsolved disappearances linked to him, or copycats. Carvings like these found near burial sites and forests across the Appalachians and beyond. He'd stalk hikers, isolate them, torture slowly with knives, starvation, psychological games, make it last days, breaking their spirit before the end. Sarah shuddered violently, wrapping her arms around herself as if to ward off the cold that wasn't just from the night air. And he's still out there? I thought he was caught and sentenced to life. Copycat, maybe, Tom suggested, but his voice lacked any real conviction, breaking slightly at the end. They searched the perimeter together, flashlights revealing more carvings, dozens of them now, forming a tight ring around their camp, like a noose slowly tightening. Footprints emerged in the mud under their beams, large boot marks, deep and deliberate, circling the clearing with methodical precision. Countersunk into the soft earth, they overlapped in places, showing multiple passes, as if someone had paced the boundary repeatedly. "These are fresh," Jake said, kneeling to touch one, his fingers sinking into the imprint. Water pooled in the depression, reflecting the moonlight like a mirror. "He's been here recently, watching us the whole time." Panic crept back in like the mist rolling through the trees, settling heavy in their chests. They huddled by the fire, sharing the last of their snacks, soggy granola bars and water from canteens that tasted faintly of plastic. Mia bandaged wounds as best she could with her kit. Stories poured out in a torrent. Jake admitted seeing a shadowy figure in the downpour, tall and cloaked in rain gear that blended with the trees. Lena described hearing whispers amid the storm, like muffled laughter mixed in with the rain. Tom felt hot breath on his neck at one point, turning to find nothing but empty air. Sarah swore the man had a knife. Its blade glinted in a lightning flash, the memory making her tremble. As the night deepened, the forest came alive with unsettling sounds. Twigs snapping sharply in the distance, leaves rustling as if brushed by unseen hands, low growls that could be wind through hollows, or something worse lurking just beyond sight. They took turns keeping watch, rotating every hour, but sleep eluded them all, eyes wide in the firelight. Jake peered into the darkness during his shift, his flashlight sweeping the trees in slow arcs. One beam caught something fleeting, eyes reflecting back with a menacing gleam, low to the ground at first? No, higher up, human height. Gone in a blink, leaving him doubting his own senses. "Did you see that?" he whispered urgently, shaking Denise awake from her fitful doze. She nodded, her eyes wide with unbridled terror, clutching his arm. Then came the first direct sign of malice. A rock thudded into the camp from the shadows, rolling to stop at Sarah's feet with a dull thump. Tied to it was a strip of cloth, bloodied and frayed, with a carved wooden charm dangling from it. The symbol etched into the wood matched the tree markings exactly, sending gasps through the group. "He's toying with us," Lena said, her voice breaking like brittle glass. "Just like Hilton did in those stories. Tortures slowly, makes you paranoid first, breaks you down mentally before the pain starts." They decided to break camp and move at first light, but the night stretched into an endless void of dread. More rocks came hurtling in sporadically, each with unsettling trinkets. A lock of hair that looked freshly cut, a broken watch stopped at midnight, remnants perhaps of previous victims lost in these woods. Footprints deepened in the mud around them, now overlapping their own tracks, encroaching closer with each circuit, the noose drawing tighter. Tom tried to rationalize it all, his logical mind grasping for explanations. Maybe it's pranksters, local kids messing with tourists. But as lightning flashed again, illuminating the clearing in a harsh white glow, they all saw it. A silhouette at the edge of the trees, tall and motionless, watching with an unnerving stillness that spoke of patience and predation. The group bolted up in unison, grabbing improvised weapons, thick branches, sharp rocks from the ground. Jake yelled into the night, his voice booming with false bravado. "Who the hell are you? Leave us alone or we'll come after you!" Laughter echoed back from the darkness, low, guttural, carried on the wind like a curse. It sent chills racing through them, raising hairs on their arms and necks. They huddled tighter around the dying fire, embers glowing faintly, the torture having begun in earnest. Not physical yet, but a mental prison. Isolation in the vast, unforgiving forest, preyed upon by a phantom who knew the woods better than they ever could. Every sound a potential harbinger of doom. Dawn broke gray and misty, the light filtering through the canopy, but relief was short-lived. As they quickly packed camp, stuffing gear into wet backpacks, Lena found a note carved into a tree beside their tarp, the letters jagged and deep. "Welcome to my game. Run if you can." Footprints led away from camp now, toward the deeper, uncharted woods. But as they followed the trail in desperate hope of an exit, they realized with sinking hearts that it looped back on itself, circling, endless. A trap designed to exhaust and disorient. The forest phantom, or his deranged copycat, had them ensnared. The rain started again, a light but persistent shower washing away any hope of rescue tracks. They ran anyway, stumbling through the thickened mud, wounds reopening under the strain. Pursuit came in snatches, fleeting shadows darting between trees, whispers calling their names in mocking tones that echoed in all direction. Jake was separated first, his foot catching a hidden limb as the group pushed through dense foliage. An unseen force pulled him into the underbrush with great speed. His scream echoed through the trees, raw and terrified, cut short abruptly by a gurgle. Denise found his body later, sprawled in a small glade, marked with fresh carvings on his skin that mirrored the tree symbols, his eyes wide in frozen horror, blood pooling beneath him. One by one, they fell to the stalker's game. Lena fought back fiercely with her branch, swinging wildly at a shape emerging from the mist, but a knife slashed from the darkness, catching her across the throat in a spray of red. Tom hid in a hollow log, breath held as footprints circled his spot methodically, the ground vibrating with each step, until panic drove him out, straight into the killer's waiting embrace, a chokehold silencing his cries. Sarah was last, running blindly through the woods, heart bursting in her chest, lungs aching as branches clawed at her. She emerged onto a narrow logging road by sheer luck, flagging down a passing truck with frantic arm waves. But even as rescuers arrived, she knew the truth. The killer was still out there in the shadows of Blackwood, carvings waiting like invitations for the next unwitting victims. Blackwood claimed its secrets deep within its tangled heart, but Sarah's scars remained, physical gashes that healed slowly, and emotional wounds that festered. Every rustle of leaves in the wind, every fleeting shadow at dusk, brought the stalking phantom back to haunt her dreams.